Nothing like a bit of refreshing honesty. At a recent campaign rally in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, Senator Rick Santorum dismissed polls showing his challenger with a double-digit lead and coined a saying worthy of Joseph Stalin. Said Senator Santorum, quote, "Democrats have polls, we have workers at the polls." And our fourth story in the countdown tonight, another candid admission, this one from the National Republican Congressional Committee. It is sponsoring robo-calls, pre-recorded phone calls to potential voters, which are at best annoying and at worst which constitute harassment and suppression of the vote and may in fact be illegal. Here is one example from the 6th Congressional District of Illinois.
Hello. I'm calling with information about Tammy Duckworth. Tammy Duckworth said she would seriously consider repealing part of the recent federal tax cut. Tammy Duckworth's plan could mean higher taxes for married couples, and the death tax would return. And repealing the current child tax credit would mean that the tax credit would get cut in half. Tammy Duckworth is wrong on taxes and wrong for Illinois. This call was paid for by the National Republican Congressional Committee and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. www.nrcc.org. Thank you for your time.
As you heard, it sounded at first blush like a straightforward negative ad, but the problem is simple. The same call is made repeatedly, sometimes a dozen or more times per day, and the opening line mimics phone messages in favor of the candidate who's named. So potential voters feel they might be being harassed, and they hang up before the recording continues, left with the impression that Tammy Duckworth, for example, was badgering them for support. A Duckworth spokesman says that, quote, "Now when we call, people think we've already made a dozen attempts to contact them. It plays on the fact that people hate these calls and makes them think it's us and not them." Multiplying that by about 50 key races around the country reveals the breadth of this latest tactic. A spokesman for the National Republican Congressional Committee said, quote, "Phone banking is used by campaigns of all stripes. Because these calls are done by computers, it could be some kind of a glitch." A glitch. In some cases, reportedly, if you hang up before the call is over, the computer dials you over and over until you listen to the entire negative voice. But even if the recipient figures out it is a negative ad, the call may still violate the do not call laws of some states. Sadly, robo-calling may pale in comparison to other gems from the bag of dirty tricks, like African-American voters in Virginia being told by phone that they may be arrested if they try to vote tomorrow because they are still registered in another state, or that their polling location has changed. Both claims, of course, patently false. Let's call in Newsweek magazine's senior editor and MSNBC political analyst, Jonathan Alter. Thanks for your time on Election Eve, John.
Hi, Keith.
The robocalling first. This looks to be fairly widespread. Is it as effective as it appears to be, getting a ton of resentment stirred up against a candidate for just pennies per call?
I think it is pretty effective, or they wouldn't do it. This is the state-of-the-art negative campaigning. It used to be that a couple days before the election, all the negatives would stop and people would put on their happy faces and do positive ads, but not this time. All over the country, Democratic candidates' headquarters are getting calls from their own people saying, if I hear one more call for Tammy Duckworth, I'm not going to vote for Tammy Duckworth. And the headquarters are saying, those aren't our ads, because what's happening is that people are hanging up and they're just hearing the name and they're assuming, as you indicated, that they're getting the call from the person named when really they're getting the call from the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee.
All right, so let's say that is ultimately in violation of some law, or it gets the NRCC fined at some point after the election. Is that just the cost of doing business?
Well, it has been in the past, but I talked to Rahm Emanuel, who's running the Democrats' campaigns for the Congress, for the House this time, and he said enough is enough. After this election's over, they obviously can't stop them now, but they are going to file a bunch of civil suits. They're going to push this to the full extent of the law. There are fines in some states for doing this of $500 a call. So very quickly, the cost to the Republican Party, if the Democrats are successful in pursuing these suits, would go up into the tens of millions of dollars. So I think you're going to see a lot of publicity after the election of the Democrats trying to bankrupt the Republicans for having engaged in this late hit just before the 06 election.
And another late hit that seems a little bit more traditional, the Virginia Senate race. Phone calls threatening arrest, saying the polling places have changed, and reportedly these flyers posted in some African-American precincts saying, skip this election. Jim Webb's campaign and the Democrats' campaign drafting a complaint to the Department of Justice. It's part old trick, part new trick. Is this the exemplar of suppression 06?
I guess it is. You know, I come from Chicago, where we've had our own history of these kinds of shenanigans. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is you can go to jail for this. In fact, there was just a conviction from the '04 campaign up in New Hampshire. And the only way to lessen this, there's always going to be some of it, is if you see the perp walk. You know, so the press has to do better at covering how this is not just really sleazy, it's illegal.
We could easily devote an entire segment, an hour, on anticipated Election Day problems. Right now, Project Vote has identified 33 jurisdictions in 9 states, concerns ranging from computerized voting machine problems, new voter ID requirements. Where do you see the headlines here?
Well, you know, it's Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Michigan, Missouri, New Jersey, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Those are the 9 states where they're really expecting some problems. My own sense is that the big headlines are going to be not in intentional voter suppression as much as just chaos, because so many of these jurisdictions are using new equipment. There are going to be glitches. The poll workers in many areas have not been well trained. So I think you're going to see a lot of stories of voter irregularities that just result from us all over the country transitioning to new balky electronic equipment.
Yeah, the usual turnover on equipment is 5%. It's 50% this year around.
It's a
county to county.
huge challenge tomorrow.
Jonathan Alter, Newsweek Magazine's senior editor, MSNBC political analyst. Great, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Keith.